We are live, live, live. It's Sunday, Sunday, Sunday. No Monster Jam, though. I am here with Mr. Paul Fahrenheit for another official Patriotarchy podcast. We're going to get into some esoteric Americanism, Americana, slash, whatever he wants to talk about as well. And Paul, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. James. I appreciate you for having me on, man. It's always a pleasure whenever I get like an hour just to sit here and talk about this bullshit, and I don't have to, bombard my family members with this bullshit, because I talk about this stuff in my IRL life too. It's like my coworkers hear an earful every day. My family hears an earful every day. Random strangers hear an earful every day. It's just I don't know, man. I mean, maybe it's just being passionate, but it's like, I don't know, there's just problems out there and I just want them fucking fixed. Sorry, can I curse on here?
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
Keep it. Well, you know what? Whatever.
The thing is, if this is a family show, I don't want to like, I can turn it on and off if you'd like. It's just I want to tell whether or not I can or can't. Someplace, maybe I should have asked you this before the show.
You know what? It is what it is. Just keep rolling.
I'll try to keep it. I'll try to keep it as low as possible. But yeah, man. I mean, that's the thing with it, is it's like there's just a lot of problems in the United States right now.
Yeah.
I mean, for those of you who listen to your podcast, don't know who I am. I mean, my name is Paul Fahrenheit, not my real name, obviously, but it's the name I've been going by. I'm from Virginia. My family's been in Virginia for a long time. I love my home state. I love everything about it. I think it's the best state in the United States, simply because it was also the first place that was settled by Europeans, or by Anglo-European civilization in the United States. There's an argument to be made whether or not the Spaniards are something almost entirely different, but I digress. But I mean, yeah, I studied history in college, specialized in particularly American history, but I also studied law, political science. I made a point of studying leadership. Heavy focus on Carlisle throughout my college. I was going through college as I was listening to The Academic Agent and a bunch of other dissident right thinkers. So whenever they would mention a thinker, I'd go to my university library and find the book they were talking about and read it. I'm a big literature guy. I love Harold Bloom and the Western canon. I've read a lot of those pieces of literature. I think they're great. I think they're one of the best ways that you can educate anyone in what it is to be of the Western civilization. Used to be a pagan, Vedic pagan, Hindu. I practiced and I did other weird stuff. Now I go to an Anglican church. The thing is people are like, oh, well, Paul, I listened to you on this other podcast and you said you went to a Baptist church on that pod. Yeah. I mean, I go to one church for a little while, and I say I'm a part of that church as long as I'm going to that church. With Protestant denominations, you can do that fairly easily. But I just decided at some point, after I had returned to, so I am a Christian now. I'm a Trinitarian Christian as well, who believes in the Nicene Creed, which to me is the bare minimum. Whomever, you need to basically profess the Trinity, and you need to believe in the Nicene Creed, and then you're a Christian. Whatever. And that's, I try to avoid theology, but really, the thing is like, I try to give Protestants the best foot that they can get, because the Protestants do have a tradition, and they have a tradition which reaches back before the Reformation, because a lot of the Protestant thinkers very purposefully attempted to model the church that they were trying to form after the early church, prior to the reforms of Gregory the Great. But the Protestant tradition really is that the only true church is those in the body of Christ. That's the only true church. All other churches are just various traditions. But there is a true church, and this is a sort of ecumenical stance. I'm not stating that to see whether and there's a lot of there are probably many Orthodox individuals who maybe don't necessarily agree with me when I say that, but that's the Protestant position, and as of right, I'm an Anglican, and the Anglican is what, they call themselves the via media, or the middle way. And, they're, what is it? Their
They took
high
a Latin
church.
term.
Yeah, they did. The thing is that the Anglican Church does not begin with Henry VIII. The Anglican Church begins with Augustine of Canterbury in the 5th century, when the Pope dispatched him to set up his own apostolic see in England, and that's why the Archbishop of Canterbury has always been the head of the church in Britain. The Catholic, the medieval Catholic. Go ahead.
And which is why the Orthodox recognize it as an apostolic see. Well, I don't want to say because that would be a weird thing to say, but they see it as apostolic succession, a legitimate apostolic succession outside of Rome.
Yeah, and the thing is it's like about the whole concept of apostolic succession. I mean, I to be honest, I don't. I'm a little bit iffy on institutions generally as a rule. I'm very skeptical of institutions.
Good.
I think institutions are the only institution I believe in is the kingdom of God and the body of Christ. Those are the only two institutions I believe in, because they're not institutions; they're just living things that are real and that currently exist and that we are all living under. But it's like man-made institutions, and I see every single church on earth as man-made. Okay. And that's of course where the disagreement comes in, and I understand there are some people who disagree with that. But I just my whole thing is that like the best people to decide how they're going to worship Jesus Christ, of course within the confines of the Trinity and the Nicene Creed, are the people in each individual community. You do need to have some outside influence that some may call artificial, in the sense of you need to make sure they're biblical. You need to make sure they're following the gospel, because if you don't, you get Protestant churches like we have in the United States waving pride flags, which I think is a massive massive problem. But
I felt the passion there. I felt that one.
I mean, no, it's disgusting to me. It's like how. Why are you going to desecrate the house of God with this absolute obscenity?
Yeah.
I mean, and the thing is it's like I think God is punishing them right now by giving all of these mainline denominations all of the money and the power in the United States in terms of the Christian world, because he's going to make them choke on it. I feel like I think God is allowing his true believers to be persecuted in the United States because now I don't know how you feel about Terry A. Davis. All right. Terry, the Temple OS guy. I like a lot of what he said. I really do think he was talking to God.
I have no idea who he is.
He was long story short, he was a gentleman with schizophrenia, but he was a really genius computer developer who wrote an operating system called Temple OS because
yeah.
Okay,
I've seen memes of him. Yes, around.
But the thing is that he's one of those insanely influential guys on internet culture. He's where the term glowy came from.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
He's what is it? And the thing is I don't trust in any men, but he had this great aphorism. He's like, he asked God why, and he would speak to God very frequently, and he would tell people what God told him, and he's like, God, why didn't you just punish Egypt immediately? Why did you have to, why did Egypt, how many plagues were there? Why did you let 10 plagues happen? And then he said, it's because God told them you have to let them build up guilt points. You have to let them condemn themselves by their own actions. And the thing is I really do think that a lot of the people in the United States, of all walks of life, are currently condemning themselves by their own actions. And I really do think that whenever they get to that breaking point, that sort of God is going to punish them, and he's going to punish them very quickly. And that's why I think God is allowing true believers to be persecuted in the United States, because, God was I don't want to speak on God's behalf, but I feel as though he strengthens the church by letting it go through a period of persecution.
As always, yes. I mean, that is definitely something that we are even seeing on my side, or on the Orthodox side, especially being a particular flavor of Orthodox, which I know you're more than well aware of, Paul. But the thing is that we are seen as the liberal side, which is kind of strange, because when you talk about that concept, which is a really neat concept, I've always seen a lot of Protestant concepts, and knowing more about you guys across the internet, and I have ones that are obviously a little bit more digestible, like yourself, and others that are just outright, I don't want to, they play their hand too fast, too hard. And that's all they have. There's not any like recourse for what they're trying to do. And the issue with there is that, like, why I'm not Protestant or Catholic. I'm in the West, I'm Western European, and I definitely recognize that all. But in a lot of ways, I have a very Hellenic spirit. There's something just deep down in me that thrives to understand or why I'm alive. And obviously that's an existential question, but it's a 50-50 shot. We know and we don't know, and it's only answered by the Orthodox Church. And that synthesis there, it's complex. You could say it's Nietzschean in a way. You could also say it's Dostoevsky-esque in a lot of ways. But the Greek flavor that's there is unique, because that's weird, because Greeks helped develop Western civilization. Like, there's no doubt about it. Very influential, highly influential on Western civilization. But there's also that point of rationale, and that's where I think when it comes to rationalized thought and very, how can I say this, systemic points of how the gospel and scripture should be interpreted, Protestants knock that out of the park. Like, they absolutely do, because they're usually more astute theologically than maybe somebody like me. They know the Bible back front to back more so than I would ever admit to. But for me, it was always lacking that internal aspect. That there's that mysticism there, that there's that, like you said, that institutionalized Christianity that I see out in the West. The Orthodox Church isn't plagued by that, because we have stuck to every tradition there is, and have synthesized it in such a way that even from our saints and our holy fathers, it has been that way since the resurrection, or since Pentecost. So I'm very thankful for that in a lot of ways. But it is a weird thing in the United States, because I feel, for other Christians, I don't want to see good Catholics and Protestants being, persecuted. Why, you don't want to wish that on other Christians, and especially on other churches who carry out an esteemed, tradition. They're not waving the pride flag. They're not saying the other thing that you can't really say on YouTube, but I'm going to say it anyway. God hates fags. They're not saying, it's from one political end of the spectrum all the way to the other, right? And to me, there's no moderation. There's no sense of purpose with either, with either of it. And like you said, well, I mean, God in some ways punishes both and exacts some sort of wrath on both. But it's, as a human being, it's in a lot of ways it's difficult to understand that. And it's just something I turned to before I got married, and it just carried me through. And in a lot of ways, there are those strokes of genius, but those strokes of genius don't come from me. That's wisdom from the Holy Spirit telling me something, right?
Yeah.
That eureka moment.
Well, and the thing is and I don't want to get this bogged down too much, because I can't. I want to discuss Americana, and instead we've discussed theology for about 15 minutes. But
light theology.
I'll leave it at this,
theology. Oh no.
Well, I'll leave it at this, Mr. James. All right. I don't want to speak for you, but I personally, I have no doubt that I will see you in heaven. I have no doubt that we're going to spend an eternal life together once all this world has passed away and the kingdom of Christ has come again.
Amen.
I have no doubt that there are many, all of my brothers in the faith in the Orthodox Church, many of the Catholics. I say many because a lot of the Catholics, not the ones here, but I say many of the Catholics, many of the Protestants, many people that I've known who proclaim Christ. I look forward, it doesn't matter what their denomination is. I look forward to seeing them in eternity, because at the end of the day, I really don't think God's gonna care that much. He's they say the road is narrow, but like the road has a very, very simple. The road is narrow, but the road is simple. All right, and
correct. You either accept God or you don't.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that at the end of the day, no matter how heated these sort of disputes can get, I think we live in a very blessed time where there's an external enemy that all of the churches can kind of agree that exists, because whenever there isn't an external enemy, Mr. JP, because God has cursed us as long as we're east of Eden. God has cursed us to have war as the state of humanity. And, if the churches don't have an external enemy, I suppose they'll turn their eyes on each other. And even if there is an external enemy, they'll turn their eyes on each other. But
well, as shown amongst the Slavic brothers. Yes. That's happening very much so in the East right now. And it's sad to see. And that's going all the way back to when, we could now I think I found a segue to get into a little bit dark esoteric Americana, if you will. But the thing is that, like, in the 90s, when the Serbian Orthodox Church was being persecuted by the Chechens, right? And they were saying things, oh, well, peace for Islam, basically. And you had bodies upon bodies that were ignored by the media of Serbian Orthodox Christians being hunted down and slaughtered by the Chechens and the Muslims who were trying to inhabit take over basically Kosovo and that part of the world. And I remember who was it at the time? Was it Bush or was it Clinton?
It was Clinton.
Yeah, bastard. But yeah, I remember him coming out and seeing some of the footage and talking about on how Islam was such a persecuted religion. And mind you, at the time, I mean, I was barely old enough to probably, by that point in time, I've probably memorized all 4 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But I remember vividly, that was one of my points where I'm like, there's something that's speaking to me here. And I know the president on the president of the United States right now isn't isn't telling me what I need to know. And then looking further deeper into, the persecutions that happen on both sides, unfortunately, both, Muslims and Christians were religiously persecuted and slaughtered during that time period too, which is, obviously, once again, you don't want to see happen. And it just struck me the wrong way, and I was just like, well, I know this president is a phony. What's next, right?
Yeah. I mean, and the thing about it is, it's like any world built upon lies. Whenever you scratch away one lie, the whole thing falls apart. And that's the problem. That's the problem with the world built upon lies. Is that lies are actually, in a very utilitarian sense, lies are not stable. They're not a what is it? They're a very short term sort of mindset. Lies are not a good thing to build something on, because it's inherently a sort of like how should I say, it's inherently a sort of, it's like building on quicksand. I don't want to use the gospel metaphor, but yeah. And the American regime in the 90s, people were willing to ignore that the lies that the United States was kind of adopting about itself, as long as there was an existential enemy, as long as there was the atheistic Soviet Union, and even and part of that was the United States kind of, especially during the Reagan Revolution, really started redefining itself as, hey, they're atheists, we're not. We believe in Christianity, and we believe in God over here in the United States, not like the godless commie Reds. And I mean, the thing about it is it's like it's true, but it's not.
Yeah.
One of the things you'll always notice whenever you research the history, not just of the United States, but really of the entire Christian West, is you find periods, even though the Christian church filled an important role in society, you'll find periods where people are basically atheists, atheists in in action, if not in, name, like, but, in a lot of their minds, being this religion was really just a subservient thing to what their culture or their tribe did, and it's like, a lot of it starts around the age of exploration, is when you start getting some of that atheism creeping into Europe. The Middle Ages, it was very religious in the Middle Ages. You want to read a book about this? We got a really good book to recommend. It's called it's been translated a half dozen different ways, but it's the waning of the Middle Ages, or the decline of the Middle Ages, or the harvest of the Middle Ages, or what. It's been translated a bunch of different ways, but it's the great work about the Grand Duchy of Burgundy, that was written originally in Dutch by the great Dutch historian Johan Huizinga.
Okay.
It's a really great book. It's how you can read not just where medieval Europe ended, but where a lot of how we imagine medieval Europe came from. And almost all of how we imagine medieval Europe, knights, tournaments, that all comes from the Grand Duchy of Burgundy. That was the real, like, and the Grand Duchy of Burgundy is what spawned is basically the reason that the Habsburgs came to control the world.
Okay.
Because, and that's where you get the sort of, the cross of New Spain, that weird looking red branch that you saw, if you ever, that's the Burgundian cross. And that was the flag of the Spanish Empire for a little while. And as a matter of fact, the most famous Habsburg, Charles V, he grew up speaking Dutch in the Low Countries, in the Grand Duchy of Burgundy.
Okay. Yeah.
And so and I don't mean to get into that, but this is before the Reformation. But the medieval, what is called Catholic Church, is almost a completely different animal.
Yeah.
The Catholic Church that exists now. Like, yeah, there was like a pope, but most people in Europe didn't even know who the Pope was. And honestly, in some congregations, they didn't even know that there was a Pope.
Yeah,
there was like,
they had those. Yeah, they were much more like the East in that respect during those times. Yeah, a lot of people do forget that you had those orders of, well, I mean, and you could basically overlap them with the East. I mean, there wasn't much difference in the Middle Ages because yet the schism still had yet to happen. But also those different orders of, like, you have
well, this is after the schism. This is generally the 1300s, 1400s.
oh,
This is the
okay.
time period I'm talking about. Although, yeah, it is starting to, in the time even before the schism, yeah, it was still, it was very much like that. But as you get into
Yeah.
like after the conclusion of the Crusades, Europe start, you got the medieval scholastics, which is kind of like the nascent modernity. Modernity starts around 1400. Is if
Okay.
you all want an idea of when quote unquote modernity starts, that's around 1400. Evola's wrong. He's a weirdo mystic.
He's also a pagan.
Yeah, and it's like, and I like Evola as much as everyone else does. He has some cool ideas,
He is
but it's
cool.
like at the end of
He
the
is
day,
cool.
he look like this idea of perennial traditionalism is just kind of, I don't know. I mean, what is perennial traditionalism? Oh, it's just, dude, it's just God with extra steps. That's all it is.
Okay.
It's literally just God with extra
Perennialism.
steps.
Yeah. Because it's that continuation of what those traditions were is carried out, and you have those specific traditions for those specific cultures, for those specific polarizations of the world, so to speak. And it's just like you said, God with extra steps, God with different contexts.
Well, yeah, and it's like, I mean, and of course, once again, you invited me on to talk about, you invited me to talk about Americana, and
Here we go again.
After 15 minutes of theology talk, we have then pivoted to a further 12 minutes of talk about the European Middle Ages.
But Europe is obviously important to American history. I mean, it's quintessential to American history. Like it helped shape the country.
Well, JP, do you remember the time I went on? Do you ever watch Academic Agents channel?
I saw his 3.5 hour podcast on libertarianism, and that was it.
So the Academic Agent sphere, and I was one of those dudes who was like watching his channel every week, at least listening to whenever he would have guests on. As time went on,
Okay.
and so he had this whole coterie going on. He had people. I think he does his content full time. He makes money for it, and good on him. He got fired from his job. I guess he deserves this because he got fired from his job for doing what he loved, and now he's getting paid to do what he loves. So
yeah,
good on him, etc. However, he hates my country, and I can't really truck with that. But the thing is I went on his show twice. All right.
okay.
He invited me on the first time because he wanted an advocate for the United States.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted someone who could explain what the United States was as a civilization. And the thing is that he's not an intellectual, he's an entertainer. All right, he's an entertainer who, and now I don't want to say he's not an intellectual because he's really excellent Shakespeare scholar, has written some great works about Shakespeare. But on YouTube, he's not an intellectual, and he kind of falls apart whenever he talks about anything other than Shakespeare. However, I'll tell you this. So he had me on his show twice. The first time he had me on because I was going to defend America and American civilization to him. And what is it? And I began by saying the United States is simply just a continuity of European civilization. If you took a snapshot of Europe at about 1580, not even 1607, like there's a lag. The United States was founded by the Elizabethan era English, which is kind of like this transition point where the Tudors, Queen Elizabeth was the last Tudor. Actually, was it Queen Elizabeth or I need to pull up my list of English kings. But the thing is like, the Tudors were the, they were the ones who founded the quote unquote Anglican Church as everyone understands it now. But the thing is that the Tudors were kind of this transitory dynasty. You get Henry Tudor, who was Henry the Seventh. You get Henry the Seventh winning at the Battle of Bosworth Field, I think is what it was called, and against Richard III, ending the Plantagenets and beginning the Tudor dynasty. And that's really, they consider it the end of the Middle Ages in England, but really it begins this transition point. Bosworth Field is I said that. But the last Tudor was Queen Elizabeth, and the Stuarts were like the beginning of like modernity in England. I'm making all this up as I go, but this is kind of my head canon, if nothing else. And the United States was founded under the conditions of Elizabethan England. Catholicism was banned. You were a part of the English Church. Various low church congregations were persecuted, like the Puritans. And this kind of creates the conditions which start leading to down the road of the English Civil War. But regardless, it was a period of great it was still a period of prosperity because the Spanish Armada bankrupted Spain. There were several Spanish armadas, and once Spain was bankrupted, it was England at this time was essentially a pirate nation. It was a nation of pirates who LARPed.
That's so awesome.
It is. No, it's absolutely fucking awesome because the
that's very appropriate.
All these pirates, like you look at their lives, like Sir Walter Raleigh and Sir Francis Drake and Sir Christopher Newport and all these other dudes who were like all like knights. They were all gentlemen, but they were also like raiders on the high seas. And you just read about that, like, oh yeah, and then they would just go into Spain, into the Spanish Main, and just plunder it and steal all their wealth and then take it back to England. And they were given titles and all this stuff. So England was a pirate nation, that like pretended to be a European court.
An empire.
Yeah. Well, and Britannia ruled the waves was not as solidified of a concept yet. But, and this is the background with which the United States was founded. And so I told AA that the United States was founded, the United States is a European nation that was founded on 3 different texts. All right. 3 different books specifically. The United States was founded on, number 1, the King James Version of the Bible, which is the most influential Bible ever.
Manifest Destiny. It pulled right out of it.
Well, that's true, but the thing about it is, I'm not even talking about that. What I'm talking about is the cultural foundation of the United States as a continuity of England and Britain and British civilization, is that the King James Bible is the English expression of Christianity. All right, Mr. JP, English is the language we are both currently speaking.
Correct.
English is the language most of the world is currently speaking.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah, it's great. Well, just as it was in biblical times, Common Greek or Old Greek was used as the trade language. English is the new trade language.
The phrase for it is lingua franca.
And
that comes from the Middle Ages, when everyone in the Mediterranean Sea would speak Frankish. Even if you were Arab, you would speak Frankish to Italians, because it was the language that all the traders knew. It was the most dominant trade language, and the lingua franca changes over time.
Did not know that.
Yes, sir. Now the lingua franca of the world is English. It's kind of declining. It was English. It was undisputedly English for the past 75 years.
Yeah.
And even before that. But English is the language that will actually, contrary to counterintuitively, English is actually the best language that you could get if you were to be an international traveler, because anywhere on the planet you go, the most likely language anyone will speak is English. And the King James Bible is the most important text ever written in the English language. Not just because of its theological importance, but because of its linguistic importance. It shaped how the English language works. Phrases of it are still used today. You know, people don't even realize they're quoting the King James Bible when they speak in English a lot of times.
Yeah.
The most famous versions of any biblical verse, like is it Psalm 37? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did I get is that Psalm 23? I could totally I'm gonna get killed for this. I'm sorry. My biblical recitation is not the best, but I attempt
That's 23.
to read it.
It's 23.
Yeah, it's 23. Okay, yeah, okay. Second guess. But yeah, and it's like and in many ways the English language wasn't as solidified of a concept back then. It was a much more organic thing. And but the King James Bible was one of the three texts that kind of set what America is. The second book America was founded on was the complete works of Shakespeare. All right. The complete works of Shakespeare is probably the most important set of, you know, whatever the King James Bible didn't do, Shakespeare made up, you know.
Yeah.
Like
those witty phrases, you know, like he had those quips that weren't exactly like.
Well, it's not even so much the phrases. It's just the fact that he constructed the English. He as he was writing those plays, he was writing the English language. He was writing the English language into being. He would make up words, or he would, you know, or he would do all this other stuff, you know, and that's the second thing. All right. And plus it's all of the values within Shakespeare plays. You know, the thing about Shakespeare plays is that this is a Harold Bloom point, but anything you read about Shakespeare tells you more about yourself than it does about the play itself. You know, Bloom would always say Shakespeare reads us, we don't read him.
Well, I mean, you know what they say about a comedy, it's just something funny without a tragedy. So, I mean, that's the weird part. Like, he structured it obviously off of, you know, I mean, all kinds of stuff, and particularly the richest tradition that he had to derive from was, you know, Roman and Greek culture when he had to write those plays. And, you know, people still to this day say, oh, it's a Greek tragedy that happened. You know, I mean, that's kind of like, it's neat on how all that was contextualized. And I mean, I read some Shakespeare in high school. I really didn't understand why people liked him. I'll be honest with you. But what always caught me is that just, man, the underpinnings of the stories, I mean, they were dark. Like, it was just some heavy stuff. And you were just like, I mean, some of this language sounds so joyful, you know, it sounds so gregarious, it sounds so boastful in a lot of ways. And you're just like Macbeth, for example, it was just like, you read what the story's about and you're like, a what? It's just, it's nuts.
No, that's exactly it. And I mean, the thing about it is it's I'm trying, what's the right angle I'm trying to come at it with? It's like it is the world, like it's the version of the stories we all remember. You know, people talk about what is canonical, what is canon. All right, what makes something canonical? And that's a biblical term that comes from the Bible, that comes from the formation of the Bible. You know, of course, you know, I don't know if the Orthodox Church has the Apocrypha in the Bible or not. I know the Catholics put the Apocrypha in the Bible. That's like things like the Book of Maccabees and things like that.
We do.
Yeah, we do not. The King James Version. Matter of fact, what another influential thing about the King James Version of the Bible is that it created the Apocrypha as a concept. It held that these books were added later as an innovation by the Catholic Church, and they went back to the original Nicene Bible.
Okay.
But they kept them together. Like you can still read them, but they're just the apocryphal texts. And
Okay.
that's why it's like and that's where even the word an apocryphal story comes from. It's it might have happened, but we're just not sure about it, and we don't want to. And the English, and that's the thing. That's why the King James Bible. A lot of people will point at the King James Bible like, why'd you take these books out? And I think it was for good reasons, like because we weren't sure they were inspired by the Holy Spirit. That's why they were taken out. But they didn't like exterminate them. They didn't get rid of them. They just put them in their own little section, called the apocryphal text.
And as you said, like that, people take hardline stances with that, and they're just like it turns into nothing but cannon fodder. I mean, it's like,
no pun intended.
Yeah. Well,
but what makes something canonical, Mr. JP? All right, what makes something canonical? It's the version of the story you remember.
Yeah.
It's when you remember the story of Julius Caesar, it always does it not include the sentence et tu, Brute? All right.
Oh.
Shakespeare totally invented that. Like he was reading, I think he was reading Plutarch's Lives, and he was reading some other histories. I think he was reading Tacitus as well, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember what the great history of Julius Caesar was.
He got stabbed.
Well, yeah, but it's like he was reading all of these like ancient texts because they were, he was reading all these ancient Roman histories that were being they were in Latin, but I think he could read Latin and Greek. But he was just inventing these stories. Although some people saying he was taking a lot less creative liberties than we give him credit for. He just had access to a lot better sources than we do, simply because of time. It's like, for example, there was this theory that when Shakespeare wrote Richard III, Richard III is like the archetypical scheming, conniving, villainous Machiavellian monarch. And Shakespeare wrote him with a limp. And everyone's like, oh, Shakespeare just invented that for the plays. But then when they found Richard III's body in like 2012, they found Richard III's body underneath a Tesco parking lot. The battlefield of was because Richard III was killed on the battlefield at the Battle of Bosworth Field at the final, which is the final battle of the Wars of the Roses, and it's when Henry Tudor was crowned king, and he was killed on the field and buried there. And they found his body, and they found he had a deformity in the leg Shakespeare was writing about.
Wow.
So it's like
wow.
So
that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's like, they took a lot. He took a lot fewer creative liberties than he might have, at least with his histories. But the thing is it's like, we remember the version of the story that the canonical author tells.
Okay.
Whenever we imagine JP, whenever we imagine the Great Depression, right? And we imagine John Steinbeck. John Steinbeck wrote the book of the Great Depression. Whether you realize, or you are thinking of that or not, that, and that's another thing about the canon. People who have never once even heard of the canon know what the canon is and recite what the canonical work is, because the work kind of stands outside of time and space.
Yeah.
All works before it bend towards it. All works after it bend back towards it.
It sounds like you sound like Paul Atreides from Dune when you say something like that.
Well, I mean, I've never read Dune.
But I see, I because in that canon, what influenced Star Wars? Dune. I mean, there's it's
was
not
Dune,
necessarily
was Dune written before Star Wars.
Yeah, very much so. But in that synchronicity, in that kind of order. Obviously, Star Wars has its own canon outside of Dune. I mean, they're both canonically
Well, when
different.
I'm going to be honest with you, man. I mean, I don't know. I don't weigh in on sci-fi.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know
okay.
much. I don't know much about it as a genre. I don't know if there's a canonical sci-fi. To me, space operas are just kind of like an attempt to put. Anyway, but it's like what is it? Wagner's work is canonical because when you imagine the story of Siegfried, you imagine Wagner's version. You know, because Wagner combined both the Nibelungen Lied, which is totally different, and the Song of the Volsungs. He combined them into basically one super version. And whenever you imagine Germanic paganism, you basically just imagine Wagner's
Yeah.
version of the
Okay.
ring cycle.
Oh wow.
And Wagner, towards the end of his life, was converted back to Christianity. He was a pagan for a large portion of his life and then converted back to his Christianity. Wrote Percival, about Sir Percival and the Grail. Famously
Okay.
pissed Nietzsche off forever, made Nietzsche hate him for the rest of his life, because Nietzsche hated Wagner. He thought Wagner, cucked basically by going back to Christianity.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Wagner, the last opera Wagner was working on that he never got to finish was Jesus of Nazareth.
Wow. Did not know that.
Yeah, I think we have the libretto, but we don't have anything else. We have the libretto and part of Act 1, but nothing else. But yeah, that's what makes a story canonical. And
Yeah.
speaking of canonical, when you think about when you think about the fall of Lucifer, and you think about the third text that founded the United States, which is John Milton's Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost is the canonical work of Lucifer. As a matter of fact, it even gave him his name.
Yeah, Satan. Yeah.
Lucifer. No, Satan's an old Hebrew word. No one called him Lucifer until the 17th century. Lucifer means light bringer, because he is the morning star. And the morning star is, I hate to tell you, JP, it is the star of the East. Because, sorry, there was a huge thunderclap outside of my house.
I didn't even hear anything.
Yeah. There have been storms rolling through this area all day. But like, Milton in Paradise Lost basically writes the version of Christianity that almost everyone in the Anglophone world kind of knows or understands.
Okay.
It's like, Lucifer was thrown out of heaven, into, it's where the word pandemonium was invented. It's where the sort of metaphysic of the United States arises from, is the United States is a Protestant. It is a Christian nation.
Yeah.
It is generally Protestant.
Yep.
It is particularly Calvinist. It is specifically Congregationalist, and that strain that influenced America's metaphysic is called the Puritans. All right. Mm-hmm. The New England Puritans, and Moldbug and it has been the mission of some of the worst people and worst thinkers on this side of things to make the Puritans the source of all of the pause in the world. And it is just not true. Yeah. It's just not true.
I can't, and even as an Orthodox Christian, I can't say that. And I have plenty of gripes about that. But
it's not even like, a lot of the times people just easily, they conflate the Quakers with the Puritans. Now, the Quakers, you can make some arguments there because they were German pietists, which is the most stupid version of Christianity I think you can come up with. It's like
piety is a virtue.
Well, but I mean, it is, but it's like, they're pacifists.
Yeah, right. The weak the weakness overturned the meekness. Yeah, I get it.
They believe that what was it? They believe that you need to be passive in the face of violence, and
Right.
they take a lot of things. So, and this is why in many cases, JP, you need, in order to have a complete understanding of Christianity, the New Testament did not make obsolete the Old. The New Testament simply gave the conclusion to the Old. However, you must still know the Old Testament, because the Old Testament is, every ounce of it points towards Jesus Christ and must be read that way. However, the Old Testament is, God didn't put all of the stuff you needed to follow in the New Testament because it was already there in the Old Testament.
Correct. But just transformed in some regards, or just given a new meaning or a new life in the New Testament.
Given, what is it? The thing is that the New Testament, as far as I'm concerned, does not explicitly lay. Now, I could be totally wrong. Could be completely wrong. Could be completely wrong when I say this. Please, this is a disclaimer. The New Testament does not even lay out all of God's laws explicitly. That's done in the book of Leviticus.
Mm-hmm.
That's done when Moses lays out the 10 Commandments. Guys, the 10 Commandments are still in effect. That's the law that God basically, that didn't change. God didn't change the law. It's just humans, and this is the Calvinist point, but it's just humans are totally incapable of following it without Jesus Christ.
That's true. That's an Orthodox standpoint too, though.
Yeah, well, I guess we're a lot more in agreement than we think we are. It's like humans are so completely and utterly depraved that we can't even do anything without Jesus Christ, basically. Like,
right.
And I mean, that's the Calvinist point. A lot of people will shit on Calvinism, but it's like none of them have ever actually read Calvinism, And the whole thing with predestination is, it's like, is God totally sovereign over all things or not? That's like the predestination question.
You're right.
And if you say or not, then he is no longer God.
Yeah. He loses. Yeah. Christ loses his power.
Exactly. And so go ahead.
Well, and to bring that point up, because, I mean, we definitely don't believe in predestination. However, there is a context to your existence, and it's that conscious choice, obviously beyond children and animals, which are absolutely completely innocent things, because they do things which are in their nature, right? Like a child is going to breastfeed, a child is going to detach from their mother, and a child is going to grow up to either, hopefully become a good person. Same thing with a bird. Bird's going to fly. Bird's going to make babies, make little chicks. Those birds are going to fly. It's going to continue this, eat, fly, poop, eat, fly, poop, right? So it's going to continue the cycle, right? And they are just doing things within their nature because they don't know, right? They don't know any better. And in a lot of ways, how we answer this question in an Orthodox context is, we are all children of God, but yet being adults, we understand that we have these conscious choices, which are either going to lead to pleasing God and knowing that he has.
Oh,
dang, that was a good one.
Yeah, did you hear that one?
Speaking of which, I think God just spoke.
Yeah, I think God wants us to stop talking about theology.
Yeah, but the interesting part of how you brought this up is that there is a point to where a lot of these different traditions and these different denominations had at one point agreed with one another, but then split up. And just as you said with the issues of, like, obviously three cornerstones of, how you laid out America's founding, in a lot of ways, you think about it and how important, and it's kind of funny that you brought up the number 3, because that's funny, and that could have been by accident or on purpose, but either way, I'll take it. But that's just it, where you have those, how can I say this? You have those very strong paths to, you kind of answer the metaphysical question with Paradise Lost. You answer the hard and fast belief system with the King James Bible. And then you have the expression of, that Anglo spirit in Shakespeare. And that's kind of the only.
And
That's
everything else. Sorry, go ahead.
That's like what I gathered from that, and just to get more momentum with it.
Well, and everything else, everything else in American history comes from that. Follows from those three texts, follows from those three sort of holdings. Everything else is an outgrowth of that.
Okay.
And there's going to be another one. Oh, it's further away.
Another clap.
Yeah, that one was way further away. But yeah, man, I mean that's kind of, and I mean that's as good of an introduction to Americana as anything, because Elizabethan England and everything that led up to that, and those three texts, that is how Anglo-America was founded, and that's where Americana comes from. And you could see through lines all the way back to it, but that's it. Yeah. Well, shoot, man, I'll tell you what. I mean, I'm going to pivot this real quick. I'm going to start talking about the Old Glory Club for the last couple of minutes we have here.
Sure.
So the Old Glory Club, what is it? A lot of you may have seen me from the Old Glory Club, but what the Old Glory Club is officially, it is a legally registered nonprofit. It is a legal entity, tax paying, all of that great stuff. So it is an official organization. It is not just some online sphere. All right. Real people have put their real names forward on it. And I think that's a big step.
Yeah.
So it's an explicitly apolitical organization. We don't engage in politics. The opinions of our members do not at all reflect the opinions of the organization. The organization takes no sides politically, etc. But the Old Glory Club is meant to be a fraternal society for Americans. America has this long and storied tradition. You want to talk about Americana? America has this long and storied tradition of fraternities, mutual aid societies. I know the Masons have bad contexts, but we have all sorts of other societies. The Elks, the Moose Lodge,
Knights of Columbus,
the Knights of Columbus. Well, they're just the Catholic Masons. They're just like Catholics pretending to be Freemasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, and yeah, they're all Mason knockoffs. But that is what it is. College fraternities. The Rotary clubs, the Rurdens.
Oh yeah, okay.
The
Shriners.
Shriner. Yeah, well, the Shriners are also the Masons. The Shriners are an offshoot of the Masons.
They're Eastern though. Got to rep the East side.
Well, they're one of. Well, I mean, JP, you should love the Masons, because in every Masonic lodge there is a chair facing east. But the thing is the thing is with it is it's the United States has this great history of these fraternal mutual aid societies. Yeah. The American Legion was one. The United Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, or the lumberjacks, the Fraternal Order of Police.
Unions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not so much trade unions. No, unions are something different.
Yeah, but I see what you like. You have the obviously brotherhood within the type of work that they're doing.
As a matter of fact, I actually think unions kind of stand against this principle, because this thing. So American society, JP, if you had to divide it, you would divide it into three pieces. All right. American society is divided into the three pieces. One of them is public life. This is anything involving the government, taxable things, voting, participation in local politics, etc. That is public life.
Okay.
All right. Private life. That's your employment, your household, your family. your friendships, all this other stuff. Anything that is, either for profit or involving you as an individual, that's your private life. Now there's a third. All right, there's a third, and not a lot of Americans know it as a category, but do have a mental space for it. It's called civil society. All right. What is civil society? Civil society is everything I just outlined. These are your non-governmental, but also not for-profit organizations. They are organizations engaged entirely in the bettering of the community. All right. Like I said, these are your fraternal orders of professions, of communities with your Rurridans and your Rotary clubs, of all of these other things. Right. Those are that is what makes up civil society. And de Tocqueville, this in Democracy in America, which is a great book. Everyone who's an American should read Democracy in America, because it outlines to you. I actually think it's a great thing to read whenever you're reading like de Maistre or these other people who are critiquing liberalism and critiquing democracy and all these other things. The reason I like liberalism and I like democracy, I would not believe it. I would not believe in it if I thought it was any source of pause. All right. Pause is just God giving. Pause is just Romans 1. The reason pause is happening is just Romans 1. It's not because of any sort of governmental system or anything like that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
A Christian democracy is just as good as a Christian monarchy. Because, even all kings even admit that they're just kind of regents in the place of Jesus Christ, at least all Christian kings.
Sure, yeah. And when we very much see that as patriarchs, or the patriarchates of the Orthodox Church, and the hierarchs are stewards in the place of Christ.
Well, yeah, and that's what Christ commands us to do, is to make disciples of all the nations until he returns. And so, but the thing is it's like, what is democracy? Well, democracy is in the initial, the way the Greeks defined it was the rule of the demos, but the demos was only ever applied to like Greek polis were founded whenever you had these warrior bands conquer a city.
City-states, yep.
Yeah, and the democracy was limited to those with military training. All right.
Yep.
And I actually really like that. I believe that, if republics want to continue, they must become like a Starship Troopers Heinlein Republic. They have to do that. It's how it has to be.
Well, you need the discipline because, like you said, there's the ethical constraints, and see, the thing is with those fraternal organizations, that's what drives a lot of the ethics, right? Somebody might not have who is, let's say in a union, but then they find these fraternal organizations, and they're like, well, I don't really go to church, and I'm kind of agnostic, or I'm atheist, all those things, right? But then they adhere themselves to that, like, well, now I have this fraternal brotherhood with the guys I work with. They're like, I didn't have, like, let's say this person that's work, I didn't have a dad in my life, or I didn't have a real strong male role model. Boom, it's like you have that build up and you have that round out of somebody who is essentially doing something good for society, working, paying their tax, doing all the things that are good for society, and then they're just trying to round themselves out more as a person, right? And I mean, that's noble, that's something that should be cherished, and I mean that gives it momentum.
Yeah, and it's like, and I mean, the thing about it is it's like, I'm not here to get into a live defense of liberalism and the dissident right. All right. And I've been pilloried, and I've been, dragged through the mud for basically speaking out in favor of that as a concept. And I'm not trying to get into that. What I'm trying to now, another thing of civil society, Mr. JP, I don't believe that church, in all honesty, I think you can fit church life into civil society, actually. I think church life very firmly fits into civil society, both the functions of the church itself and the sort of community around the church. All right. And many of these fraternal societies we're talking about were outgrowths of church communities,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and that's the thing is it's like,
Yeah.
but it's like, and so what the OGC, to bring this back to the OGC a little bit, the OGC is just the next in a very long line of American fraternal orders, of American fraternal societies. Membership is limited to those who are, we only have 3 limitations to membership. You have to meet 3 categories to be a member of the Old Glory Club. You need to be at least 18 years of age. All right. You need to be male, and you need to be an American. Now, what constitutes an American? The Old Glory Club decides who is and is not an American.
Okay.
All right. And so, anyone, like, there's been people who are going around saying, hey, is this just a club for heritage Americans? Is this just a club for guys who are here back in 1776 and all that? And I mean, that's going to be a very large part of it, because those people don't have a voice in American politics right now. And so we're trying to correct that deficit. However, if your family arrived here in 1848, or if you personally, your family didn't get here till the 20th century, but you speak English and you believe in the American project and you believe in the American people, then we're more than happy to have you on. That's how it is. It's like we define who is an American and who isn't. And that's something I want to make clear, is it's like, hey, you have to be a man. This is a man's club specifically.
It's a fraternity.
Yeah, it is a fraternity. Now, if there are any women listening, stay tuned. But we may have something for you soon. But look, the point is that the Old Glory Club is the first attempt to make a fraternal order out of this internet subculture called the dissident right, that is meant to reinforce the internet subculture. We're not trying to be a replacement for the internet subculture. We're just trying to get more people to be more comfortable with going IRL. The internet is how we do all of our meetings. It's how we keep everything organized.
Yeah.
But the thing is that, and we're setting up chapters all over the United States. I am personally helping found one in Virginia. There are others being founded there's some being founded in Georgia, Connecticut, and in other places. All right. And that is what the Old Glory Club is it's meant to be a network of people that are like-minded, that are of this general dissident right milieu. Maybe they don't agree on everything, but they are a fellow traveler with you and you can cooperate. And so let's say, Mr. JP, you were a member of the Old Glory Club, whatever place you're in, you remember the Old Glory Club, and you wanted to go to Tennessee for whatever reason. All right. It would be as simple as you hit up the chapter head of the Nashville chapter, wherever, and you say to him, hey, I'm from the Old Glory Club, this chapter. I'm coming to Tennessee at this time through this date. Any possibility any of your guys could give me a place to stay or could show me around or anything like that? That's what the Old Glory Club is meant to facilitate. Is we are trying to set up a social technology, a means of which our guys can communicate with each other outside of internet spheres. That's and good. Inside of internet spheres. Yeah. Because we're meant to just make it reinforce. Because one of the biggest strengths of the dissident right, I think, is how decentralized we are.
Yeah.
Is how internet based we are. Because it's really hard to, call a bunch of people who are keyboard warriors like terrorists. It's really difficult. And it's difficult to get all of us in one place and catch us. And when we all get in one place, it has to be under an official organization, under official business outside. And that's why it's important that, look, the Old Glory Club, what we're looking to do is to make it such that in order to be a member, you need to be willing to dox yourself, to put your real name and face out there. Mm-hmm. All right. And, my real name and all that is on the paperwork. A bunch of other people who are content creators, you may know, have put their names on the paperwork.
But
so it's like,
but that painting of yours stays, right? That's,
well, I mean,
that's on your, that's got to be on your state ID. I mean, that's
well, that painting is William Byrd II. But but the thing is it's like, yeah, I mean, yeah, we're not expecting people to like change their online profiles, and like start posting face everywhere. That's not at all what we're doing. But it's basically like, hey, look, you need to be willing to dox yourself to your friends. You need to be willing to meet with your friends and call each other by their real name. The whole point of this is we're attempting to build an elite. All right. We are attempting, how are elites built? Through cooperation. We don't have money, we don't have power, we don't have anything like this. You know what we do have? Number one, we have God. That's all you need. If the Lord is with something, it cannot fail. Number two, we are the most competent group of people in the United States right now. And we're the most unified by instinct and principle.
Yeah.
And
that is a powerful thing.
Yeah, it's very powerful unto itself. And it's like, the thing is you need to adopt an ecumenical mindset when coming into this. It's like, this is why I make the point. It's like, when the church is persecuted, it doesn't matter if you're Orthodox or Catholic. Everyone who's Christian is looked down on.
Right.
Correct. And I mean everyone who's seriously Christian.
Correct.
They don't have a problem with you. They don't have a problem with you if you say you're Christian, but you never really go to church and you never quote the Bible at them.
Yeah.
And you never tell them, hey, you shouldn't, and I'm talking about anyone in your real life. You never say to them,
hearing about your freaking pronouns, please leave me alone.
Or it's even as something as like, whenever my coworker like takes the Lord's name in vain, and I'm not saying I don't do that. I do that quite often. Whenever my coworker takes the Lord's name in vain, I look at him and I say, please don't blaspheme. Because it's like, and things like that are things that the world can't stand, because it's like and it's like, or if you're like, look, I'm not going to go to this diversity seminar because I just quite frankly think it's anti-Christian and my faith will not allow me to go.
Right.
It's like, they don't like those Christians. They like the Christians who are, who aren't Christians,
Yes.
But
like you said, the pacifists in your piety, because that's the thing where that's what gets under my skin too, because it's like, you could have so many good Christians who are obviously they're weak and they're liberalized in a lot of ways. And they become well, almost impious because they in turn liberalize their faith, and they don't have that anchor. They don't have anything that's built on a solid foundation. So therefore they'll be like, oh, you know what? You get these whack jobs saying out there like Christ could have led a pride parade, and it's like, are you nuts? Like, is there something wrong with you? And that's another way to blaspheme God and obviously take the Lord's name in vain. And it's just like, what planet are you living on, bro? Like, is this something that's just new? And nothing new is under the sun there as well. I'll interject that. And to me, it is in a lot of ways with the true persecuted Christians. It's just as if you had the Jews who were persecuted in Egypt and had to exile because of and obviously there's the physical form of exile. There's obviously a spiritual and a mental component to it too. And it's just like, that to me speaks volumes when people can stand up and say, it's not because I want to be, particularly mad towards these group of people that want to express their particular identity politic here. But in a lot of ways, it's to Christianize it is not at all the aim, and it should have never been the aim in the first place. And for them to try to do that, and in a lot of ways, I see this something as uniquely. This is uniquely American. Like this is uniquely an American Christian thing to do, because you don't see old school traditional Catholics probably doing it in Italy. You don't see a lot of the Orthodox world doing this. You definitely probably don't see as much of it in Protestant parts of Europe, old school Europe, try to do this. I feel like a lot of this has become, to contextualize the gospel in a way that is the new iteration of, the bastardization of God's word. It's strangely, it's uniquely American, and it's bizarre. And
Well,
then and like you said, the people who are truly inspired, it's bizarre to us, right? And we're living here.
yeah, and I mean, the thing is it's like, I didn't mean to go too much down this rabbit hole, but it's
Yeah,
like, yeah,
I know what you mean, though. I know what you
yeah,
mean. It's weird.
it's the thing about it is it's like, the thing about it is that what the Old Glory Club is attempting to do is it's a means of organizing our guys. It's a means of our guys coming out into what is it? It's a means of our guys coming together, unifying, pushing things in the real world, being a part of
Yeah.
the real world, being a part of. This is how the dissident right succeeds. The dissident right succeeds not by sitting there at the frickin' Denny's table with your racist friends IRL and like snickering that the waitress, oh, she doesn't know how racist we are, guys. Oh, she doesn't know how much we don't like the Jews. And it's like, well, it's like that's not how you win.
Yeah.
That's actually how you fit the left stereotype of you. That's how you make yourself into the left stereotype. No, how you win is you put your best face on and you step forward and you pay the social price for believing in what you believe. It's like, no, it's true that there are various racial disparities and IQ correlations. And it is true that this has massive societal consequences. It is true that, societies that worship Jesus Christ tend to do better in the long run than societies do not. It is true that women do not perform at as high of a level as this, and this, and need to be in more subservient roles. All of this is true. Okay. It's all true, but it is something that you need to be willing to pay the social price to say.
Yeah.
You need to be, and you need to be confident that you actually believe in what you're saying you believe in on the online sphere. And that's, and the best way we can do that is make it as easy as possible for people and give them a support network. The last thing the Old Glory, I want to say about the Old Glory Club, what we're trying to do is, let's say one of us does get doxxed or one of us does get canceled. We've already done this for one individual. I'm not going to repeat his name, but he's a Eastern Orthodox like you, Mr. JP. But there's this one individual who got fired from his job because of some associations. And we were able to raise, I think, about $3,000 for him.
Wow.
Across our network. And so that's another thing. What the Old Glory Club is meant to do is, the idea of doxing insurance was floated out there. Like you pay for a club insurance, and if you get doxed, you get a massive cash payout. But it's like, but the thing is it's like, it's more of like, if something bad happens to you, the whole network will pull together and like make it so that, whether it's finding you jobs or, keeping you afloat, making sure you can pay this month's rent or something like that. That is another thing what the Old Glory Club is meant to do. It's a mutual support network. All right. And, if any of you have any interest in any of those things, if you want to support any of those things, look into the Old Glory Club. We do content as well, but that's more of a promotional thing and for revenue generation, because, all of that money that people spend on Old Glory Club streams goes straight back into the Old Glory Club just to reinvest it into the Old Glory Club. None of us take a salary. None of us get paid for it. We're all giving nothing but our time for free. in order to keep this thing going. And all that money that you give us on these Old Glory Club streams or via our Substack, all that money, basically all of that money keeps us going.
That's
so
amazing.
Yeah. And so regardless, if you know, any of you have any interest in supporting anything like that, go check out the Old Glory Club if you can. And I mean, yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about it.
Nice. Very good. Very good. And obviously we will continue with a few more of these discussions. It was definitely a pleasure and a joy having you on, man.
Oh, thank you, Mr. JP. I appreciate it very much. I'm happy to come back on if you'd be willing.
Oh yeah. And you know, also bring your friends because we got views and obviously, you know, other than that, check them out. It's the OGC, but that's not how we say it up here in me being a Yankee, you know, one of those that dirty word that you probably don't like to hear too often. But other than that,
I don't care, man.
I know. But other than that, it was great.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Mr. JP. It was outstanding. I'm very happy you invited me on.
For sure.